Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this week's edition of the Thursday Talks webinars on DM&E for Peace. Just in case you've forgotten, and for those of you who are new to the Thursday Talks, my name is Jack Farrell, and I am the DM&E for Peace project manager at Search for Common Ground. Today, I am delighted to welcome my colleague, Carlotta Fassiotti, regional design monitoring and evaluation specialist at Search. And Carlotta joins us today to lead a discussion on building peace through sustainable business practices, what we've learned. Just a note, if you have a question during the webinar, you can write it on the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we will address it once we reach the question and answer section of today's webinar. I'm now going to hand over to today's guest, Carlotta. It's wonderful to have you back on the Thursday Talks. Feel free to take it away when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Jack, and welcome to everyone. Just to guide you through today's presentation and giving you an overview of what we're going to discuss in the next 20 minutes, there's going to be an initial very brief background on Search for Common Ground engagement with mining company for promoting sustainable business practices. And then the second section is going to be around the findings coming from one of our most recent evaluations in this field from a project called Let's Join Hands in Development Together, or the Swahili title that you can see here in the slide, implemented in Tanzania. And then this is going to be followed by 6 key lessons learned that based on this evaluation we were able to draw. And the question and answer session. So to give you a little bit of background, Search for Common Ground has been engaged with various actors in and around the mining areas across different countries in the African continent, and that includes Guinea, Madagascar, and Tanzania. Using its unique common ground approach to foster sustainable business practices. And one of our most recent evaluation of our 8 years of engagement with Barrick Acacia Mining in Tanzania shed lights on how meaningful was that engagement and what worked and what didn't work. And therefore, based on those findings, we were also able to look back to other programs in Guinea and Madagascar, and then draw the lessons learned that I'm going to present afterwards. And so we were able to really reflect in a meaningful way on this engagement with mining companies and other actors around the mining areas, and understand what was working and what we have learned. So very briefly around the evaluation. So the project title is Let's Join Hands for Our Sustainable Development, and it was a 24-month project implemented starting from January 2018. Supported and founded by Barrick Acacia Mining. And that was a project, a 2 years project that was built upon a partnership between Search for Common Ground and Acacia since 2011. And it started in a region in Tanzania that is called North Mara, and then spread to Shinyanga region. Specifically, the evaluation had 3 main objectives that you can see in the slide. So the first one was really to understand what is there any return of investment in peace building for Acacia, and also understanding, is there any reasons why mining companies should invest in sustainable business practices and specifically in peace building. The second one was quite standard for evaluation, and so was to understand the level of achievement of the project results based on our results framework. And then the third one was focused on understanding, was this sustainable? What is enduring beyond the project? What is going to be there when the project is gonna end. So going to the very first objective, and yeah, the evaluation applied a very standard approach. So we had a survey with the communities, both participants and non-participants living in and around the mining areas, as well as focus group discussions and key informant interviews. And so concerning objective 1, what we have learned is that Peacebuilding works and actually allows mining company to save money. Especially the approach that was used was the return of investment calculation that you can see in this table. And it was very interesting because we were able to go back to 2014. Unfortunately, we were not able to collect data from starting from 2011, or the data were not accurate enough. But yeah, we were able to see the evolution of, for instance, like total transpassers to mining site. We were able to count how many fatalities happen in the mining sites from 2014 up to 2018 and how this evolved. Or for instance, the grievances that were lodged towards Acacia by the population in the different mining sites. And we saw that all of these 3 aspects steadily reduced, with some exceptions between 2016 and 2017, but like steadily reduced over time. And although we were not able to do an exact calculation of the investment that Acacia did in the past, in these 4 years, by investing in Peacebuilding, we were able to clearly show that they did save money. They did save money by, for instance, like reducing the number of transpassers or reducing the number of fatalities for which often or all the time Acacia needs to pay for, or reducing the investment in securities that around the mining, right? Yeah, and therefore, I mean, it was very important to show how, like, in fact, there was a returning of investment just by investing in Peacebuilding work. Concerning the second evaluation objective, therefore, what worked and what didn't work, the evaluation clearly showed that the training were very successful. The training with police members or the training with Acacia staff on voluntary principles for security and human rights, on the common ground approach, and on conflict transformations, allowed, for instance, police officers to increase their knowledge, but also to use their knowledge at least once a week in the community in and around the mining. Or, for instance, Acacia staff who participated to the training had an increased awareness of the most relevant community issues, interests, and needs. This increase in knowledge also determine a change in behavior. And this is also shown by the fact that 70%, meaning the vast majority of the community members, reported that the local police respected and upheld the human rights and the voluntary principles. So we were able to see these correlations from our awareness and training sessions down to changing behavior of people who attended those sessions. And then, therefore, because there was this behavioral change, there was also a shift in the relationship between the police, between the community members, and also between Acacia staff and communities. So there was a change in relationship in a positive way at all levels. Other, like, 2 important findings that came out, it was that there was also an increase of trust towards local government leaders by the population, where 65% of community respondents trust community leaders in their communities. What didn't work very well was the perceptions around the sense of security. This didn't improve. However, for this finding, what is important to say is that, first of all, the vast majority of the people still felt safer than 2 years ago. So we started from a very low baseline value. And also the focus group and the key AI allow us to dig a little bit more deeper into why they didn't feel safe. And so the two main reasons that were mentioned for that, for that feeling of unsafe was first the perceived damage or loss of their homes from perceived blastings occurring at the mining sites. And then the second one was for the perceived environmental damage related with the mining site. This said, it's important that if we go back to the return of investment calculation, we did see a reduction in the number of accidents, in the number of transpasses. So it's important also to notice that this was not an actual reduction of safety, but more of a perceived one. And it's important, and this data is important for what I'm gonna show you. Sorry. All right. So another thing that worked very well was the radio program. Although it was used in a very small scale, what the evaluation clearly showed is that people who listened to the radio program were more likely to mention that there was positive cohesion around the mining sites compared to the one who didn't listen. The same way, people who listened to our radio program rated relationship with police as more positive than non-listeners. And finally, the other two aspects are that listeners agreed that Acacia staff had an increased understanding of the most important issues or relevant issues in the communities compared to non-listeners. And then they also felt more that Acacia and upheld human rights and voluntary principles. So this clearly showed that, for instance, if the radio program would have been expanded to a bigger audience and presented factual events around security, the negative perceptions about unsafety around the mining site might have shifted. Finally, concerning the third objective around how sustainable is this project beyond, how sustainable are the achievement of this project beyond the project itself, the two main findings were that the vast majority of respondents confirmed that they had initiated an alternative livelihoods or they were willing to initiate an alternative livelihoods in the near future. So that was like 92%. And then yeah, like over 75% of respondents felt that they had the tools and the skills needed to initiate these alternative livelihoods. And this really showed that efforts to educate community about these alternative options that are not related to the dependency on the mining, right? Working for the mining company have been very successful. So based on these findings, what we found this, and there's much more. So this is just like a very small brief of the evaluation. The evaluation is super interesting. So I strongly encourage all of you to go to the DM&E for Peace website. Under resources, you're gonna find the evaluation, or if you wanna go on the search website under the Tanzania page under evaluation, you're gonna find the evaluation is public and accessible, easily accessible to everyone. So these evaluations and the findings really trigger us to say, okay, what about our other engagement with mining companies? Is there anything that, can we say that some of those findings can be extended as lessons learned or things that we are seeing also in Guinea, in Madagascar, or in other type of engagement with mining companies specifically, or the private sector? And this is where we started looking back at other studies, internal and external, that we did around engagement with mining company, and we were able to draw 6 main key lessons learned. The very first one is value for money. So we understood that not only peacebuilding work impacts and can impact positively community affected by the mining and increased relationship among private sector, private actors, including mining actors, mining companies, but also that these companies that decide to invest in peacebuilding can get considerable return of investment by funding them. And the Acacia project was a very good example where a mining company was able to spend less on security and yet being able to achieve better results and having a stronger and a better relationship with the community and being able to do their work without any blockage, without any impeachments, etc. Lessons 2 was that this engagement is long-term. These are not results that happen today from tomorrow. These are results that take time. And especially because they entail trust, they entail building relationship among the members. So these are things that really need 3, 4, 5, 10 years engagement. And the Acacia project is a very good example where we saw, for instance, like transfers of mining decreases by 6,400 in 2015 down to less than 1,000 in 2018. The third lessons learned is that it's very important to that population, no matter what you do, no matter your level of engagement and your type of peacebuilding project, it's important that you envisage activities that allows communities to have access to accurate information. So the media program that we saw is a very good example, right? So a radio program, for instance, can be a very good tool for that, or awareness sessions where you inform the different participants about specific topic. But it's very important because perception shifts very quickly, and to shift positively take time. An example is the unsafety feeling, right? As though the accidents and number of incidents was reduced. So it's important that you create this channel to share accurate informations. And then it's also important that not only you create access to accurate information, but you also create effective channels for the populations living around the mining companies to voicing their concerns. And I mean, this can be done through dialogue sessions, for instance, or sessions that allows communities to channel their grievances in a way that it's peaceful and in a way that allows for dialogue and interactions. This, again, it's very important because and if these type of channels don't exist, they can really put in peril all the rest of the projects. And that was also important. We saw that in Guinea, we saw that in Madagascar, where if communities didn't feel like, no matter all the rest of the activities that we did, they couldn't really channel their grievances and have this type of dialogues with the mining companies, with the local actors, they will grow frustrations and we will put in peril all the other type of results. Lesson 4, it's about the importance of investing in alternative livelihoods programs. And again, dependency on mining around mining site is very much, it exists and it is a big problem. Most of the population living around the mining, they are dependent on the mining for the revenue. And so it's very important to create these alternative livelihoods programs for community members so that first, when the mining company is not going to be there, they're still going to have a mean of survivals and of income and revenue, and also yeah, to support the fostering of positive relationship among the different actors. Lessons 5 is that the commitment needs to happen at all levels. our 3 programs in Guinea, Madagascar, and Tanzania showed us that enduring changes can only be achieved if the commitment is across all levels of the mining companies and other actors involved, security sectors, actors, local government actors. If there's no buy-in by any of these actors, this again can put in peril all your achievement on the other aspects. So you have to make sure that when you identify your stakeholders, you consider all the people who have an interest around the mining companies, and not only the mining companies members, but also that there is a buy-in from all the staff of the mining companies. And that is not only of the ones who are in the field, having a regular relationship with the communities in the field, but also the ones who are at the office and maybe file complaints or respond to complaints, etc. And then finally, the last lesson learned was about capacity, the importance of capacity building. So the results in Madagascar, in Guinea, and in Tanzania showed that the trainings were very effective in trigger not only change in knowledge of participants, but also other type of change. So they're really at the basis of all the other type of activities. If you don't start with those type of trainings, and not only trainings, but also capacity buildings on responsibilities of, for instance, local leaders around the voluntarity principle for security and human rights, or also awareness sessions where you raise awareness of specific groups around the voluntarity principles, around conflict transformations, etc., are really at the basis of all the others activities. So you have to start from that to trigger this change in knowledge and awareness, and so that you can carry on the other type of changes. And I'm going to stop there because I've talked for even more than what I should have, and I'm opening this to the question and answer, and thank you so much for your attention.
Carlotta, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. To our audience, thank you for joining us today again. We're now opening up the webinar for your questions. A couple of notes about our format for those of you who are unfamiliar or new to the Thursday Talks. You can submit a question in 2 ways. The first is through the question function on GoToWebinar. That will allow you to type your question. The second is to click on the hand icon to raise your hand, which will allow us to unmute your microphone so you can ask your question live. When you do submit your question, we ask that you submit your name and affiliation. Just a note, these talks are recorded and posted on DM&E for Peace, so those who are not able to join us at this time can go back and listen to the presentation and our discussion. Carlotta, I'm going to kick off today's discussion with a selfish question, because I'm going to use my moderator's privilege. And this comes down to, you had a slide, I think it was your second or third slide, around the return on investment, and you guys were able to put a hard number on what the return on investment was. What was the counterpoint to that return on investment? Like I said, if it was $1,000, what was that? Was it just $1,000 for the $250,000 invested in the program? Like what's the counterpoint here?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jack. These are very good questions, and yeah, I strongly invite you to read the evaluation further to get more details about the methodology. But yeah, so it was obviously it's not a precise method, just because we were not able to get from the company exact financial costs that Akasha had, for instance, for each incident or for each trespassing, right? So we were not able to get this type of figures from Akasha. And what we did, what the evaluator did, Nicola, she therefore attributed an individual value to each trespassing, to each fatality, and to each grievance. Obviously, it's not, again, as I said, it's not accurate, because the grievances, if the grievances was about someone losing an arm while working at the mining, then obviously the cost entailed would be way higher than someone losing a cow, right? For instance. So it wasn't accurate, but it still shown that there was this increase in the investment that the company had. So there was a formula that was used, but basically every so the three aspects, trespassing, fatalities, and grievances, to each of them a specific value was attributed, and that's the figure on the return of investment that you can see in the last column. So this is basically represents the return of investment for each dollar that was invested in Peacebuilding.
Great, thank you, Carlotta. I think, yes, assigning that value is an incredible challenge for our field, and we've hosted a number of discussions over the last couple of years around cost effectiveness of Peacebuilding and what actually is value for money. So I think the methodology will be hugely relevant to those of us online today, and I'm going to put a link to the full evaluation in your chat box. That's to all our audience members, so that you can access the evaluation on DM&E for Peace. Our next question comes from Inala Mumba. And Inala writes, I like the inclusion of return on investment. Was the return on investment done with a comparison group in order to consider an impact investment, or was it just based on the treatment group itself?
It was just based on this specific project, right? So we didn't do any comparison with other type of investments that either Akasha or other mining company did outside the project.
Great, thank you very much, Carlotta. The next question comes from, let me see, we have so many questions coming through that my dashboard is fluttering, I think is the best way to describe it. The next question comes from Eric Abitbol, who is from Universalia, a practice leader in environment security and conflict transformation. And Eric writes, thank you for the interesting webinar. I'd be interested to learn more about the indicators of Peacebuilding that were used for the study and how they were crafted. Are they reflective of the results framework of the project? Were they developed from specific literature around Peacebuilding, or were they developed around participatory processes, trying to engage local communities and allow local companies to develop them? Or were they developed by the mining company or others?
Right, and yeah, thank you for the questions. So I guess it's a mix of different things that were mentioned, right? So these indicators were developed based on past experience of search and literature review of which indicator really allowed us to speak about the changes that we were achieving in the peacebuilding sectors, but also following a consultations with Akasha themselves, who were the ones who finally approved and founded the project. So there were a little bit of the different aspects, but just to mention some of the indicators that were used, and then obviously in the evaluation at the very end of the evaluation, you will find a table with all the different indicators and the baseline and final values. But there were indicators that allowed us to track the perceived feeling of safeness around the mining sites, right? So for instance, the percentage of community members who report feeling safe around mining sites, but also the level of relationship around the different actors. So for instance, the percentage of community members who perceives that their relationship with the police members are positive, or the ones who perceive that their relationship with the Akasha staff is positive. And then also indicators around the ones that I presented in the sustainability aspect, right? So indicators around people who feel that they do have access to alternative livelihood interventions, or they feel like they have the skills and the tools needed to start their own alternative livelihoods. And then finally, there were also indicators about dialogue and how much the community members felt that they had access to platforms for dialogues with the different stakeholders. And then there were also, so many indicators were focusing on the community members aspects, but also some of the indicators were specifically for the security sector actors, and some were for Acacia. But these were the main aspects that we took into consideration while developing the indicators. The return of investment was not part of our initial logical framework. However, we thought it was very important to have it in our final evaluation. And so we developed the approach with the evaluator, Nicola.
Great, thank you, Carlotta. And just a reminder to the entire audience, you should now have a link to the full evaluation in your chat box on your GoToWebinar dashboard. I'm going to combine a few questions here, a couple around the fourth lesson learned, Carlotta, which I believe is the alternative livelihoods. And these questions come from a number of people, including Liz McClintock of the Bridgeway Group and our colleague Owen O'Leary of Search Brussels. And what was the importance of alternative livelihoods to this project? And I guess it would be great if you could elaborate more on the relationship between Search's work and the need for alternative livelihoods.
Right. Yeah. And then thank you for this question. So it was an important piece of the project because this was also a way to ensure sustainability of the different results in the long term, right? But it might, although it might not seem a very typical peace building activities, it was still deemed important to introduce this component, and especially in these last 2 years, knowing that first of all, some of the mining sites were about to close or were closing during or after the life of the project, and therefore we deemed important to introduce this component. So it was something that was added specifically in these last 2 years due to what we learned also from the precedent phases, right? And so the lack of sustainable means of income and revenue beyond working for the mining company. So in terms of activities that were done to support this livelihood components, so we trained on alternative non-mining economic development initiatives. And after having trained the people on those, we also supported 4 initiatives at the local level through grants. So these were the main activities for these components.
Great, thank you, Carlotta. Our next question comes from Mindy Reiser, who is the Vice President of Global Peace Services USA. And Mindy asked if you could talk more about how you involved women in your peace building activities and what approaches seemed most effective in engaging women in these activities.
Right, thank you so much. And this is a very interesting and important question. And just to stress that this was not the focus of the project. However, we did take into consideration representations of different stakeholders and participants in the different activities, and therefore make sure that there was an equal or a balanced representations of the different groups, and that included young women and women, and yeah, also taking in considerations their specific needs in the framework of the activities, and that goes from choosing the right time for implementing your dialogue sessions, so that you ensure that there's going to be a balanced participations, and even so taking into consideration the needs of these of the women and young girls, but also men and young boys, so that you can have this type of diverse representations at your activities. Same way in which the location in which you implement your activity is very important, right? So taking into consideration these different aspects and needs at every step of the project and for every activities that was implemented.
Great, thank you, Carlotta, and thank you, Minnie, for your question. I am going to take this opportunity to unmute a member of the audience. Hussein Sengu is from Search in Tanzania, I believe. And Hussein, I know you had your hand raised. I'm going to unmute your microphone. So please feel free to make your comment to the audience today.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Carlotta. This was a very brilliant presentation. Actually, I don't have a question as I wrote the text there. I just wanted to add that from this brilliant presentation, we have also learned that there is a lesson learned. If I had an opportunity, I would add it to be number 7, that we are able to change conflict into the opportunity. For example, we have seen how the community behavior in the previous, the community versus the investor was like an enemy. But in the end of the project, and we have seen the results in the presentation there, it turns out to be an opportunity. So the community now is seeing the investors as the development partner and not the enemy. And that was one of the very best achievement that we have seen in this presentation. So thank you very much. I just wanted to add that.
Hussein, I really appreciate you sort of unmuting your microphone and vocalizing your comments to the audience. It's great to hear from you, and it's great to hear about the opportunity that can be created and the opportunity it can create for local communities and in attracting private sector investment and private sector engagement, and see them as a development partner. Our next question comes from D. Richard Tanto, and Richard writes, was there a participatory social, economic, and environmental analysis before the project started, and did it influence your results positively?
Sorry, Jack, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, this one's dense. Indeed, Richard, if you want to raise your hand, you can ask it live so we can discuss this a bit further. Please feel free to do so. But Richard's question is, was there a participatory social, economic, and environmental analysis before the project started, and did it influence your results positively?
Right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't understand, but now it's clear. Sorry, you were cut off. So yeah, well, there was so not specifically social, economic, and environmental analysis, but there was indeed an initial lessons. How can I call it? So there was an internal evaluation. Let me call it internal evaluations that was done for the precedent phases, through which we were able to detect some of the important lessons learned that then made it to this phase. And so, for instance, like again, the livelihood programs was one of the main findings that came out from that initial or final evaluation of the precedent phase that was used as a baseline to inform this new one, and therefore we were able to integrate that. Or we also understood, for instance, the importance of the dialogue aspects, and therefore creating this channel for community members, Akasha staff, and security sector actors to communicate and dialogue and channel each other frustrations so that they could address those and yeah, improve those. So not as specifically social, economic, and environmental analysis, but definitely there was a study that was done to end the present phase, and it was used as a baseline to start this one. And it included participatory method. It wasn't like a fully a whole participatory study, but included participatory method that allowed us to draw important lessons.
Great. Thank you very much, Carlotta. I'm going to make time for one last question from the audience. And this question comes from Giuseppe Sirocco. And Giuseppe comes from the ICOCA. And Giuseppe writes, you've mentioned police and mine staff. What has been the role of private security in advancing your peacebuilding efforts?
Right, that's a very interesting question. So we not only worked with the police, but we also worked with local and private securities in terms of training. So it wasn't only for the national police, but also for the different private securities that were working in the mining and hired by Acacia. So that means that the role was very important, and yeah, it's not as important as the police, in the sense that they were included in our trainings, they were included in the different activities that we implemented.
Great. Carlotta, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation and for a very open discussion today. And thank you to our audience for your incredible engagement. As we end today, I just want to say something about the circumstances we find ourselves in. And I know that this is an extremely challenging time for every person on this webinar. Due to coronavirus, the world as we know it isn't the same, and frankly will never be the same. For those of us on today's webinar that work in conflict-affected countries and settings, there's an uncomfortable sense of familiarity with what is happening in our neighborhoods, cities, countries, and around the world. And why am I saying this? Well, ultimately, DM&E for Peace is a community founded on the idea that the strength of the collective is greater than that of the individual parts, that our field is better when we coordinate and learn together rather than acting unilaterally. And right now, that sense of community is vital in the road ahead. So I want to leave you all with a message of hope. Look out for each other, be a friend to those in need, and we will get through this. Thank you again to Carlotta for a great presentation, and thank you to everyone for taking the time to join this webinar today. The recording is going to be posted online on our media gallery, so please return to it. Please feel free to continue the discussion in the comments and share it with your colleagues. We're going to be back in a couple of weeks with more webinars to keep you occupied, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. If you are interested in hosting one of these Thursday Talk webinars, please feel free to get in touch with me or Jennifer Howell from the DM&E for Peace team, and we can make that happen. Take care, everyone, and stay healthy.